Welcome to Pera's Playbook. This is your host, Alex Pera. Let's open up our playbook and see who our guest is. Please enjoy. Welcome to episode 109 of Pera's Playbook. Today I'm joined by Chris Salani. He was a 4-year starting punter at Michigan State, also had a few years with the hockey program. He totaled 213 punts for 7,696 yards, an average of 36.1 per game over 44 games in 4 years. Chris, appreciate you joining me. How you doing on this Monday evening?
Yeah, no, hey, not a problem being on. I appreciate the time with you. For a Monday evening when the sun is still out and we can still feel the sun, we're happy to be at this part of September and enjoying it still.
Yeah, beautiful weather right now. It's just gorgeous.
I know. We'll take. Hey, month of September is always turning out to be better every year.
Yeah, it is, and we'll take that, especially with the way our winters can be. Definitely, we'll take that. So, I often like to go back to the beginning with guests, kind of start their recruiting journey and then work forward. And especially, with guests that were recruited, in a different time. I mean, the recruiting has changed so much in college athletics now with NIL deals and, flashy photo shoots, guys doing their visits and they're in the locker rooms and they get all the fancy pictures. And, it's a totally different, kind of way to recruit than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And then especially coming out of the UP, that's obviously difficult for athletes getting the exposure, for big schools and getting recruited. So what was your kind of whole recruiting experience like?
Yeah, um, back in the day, like you referenced, Alex, the ability for colleges to go out and recruit early in the tenure of high school student athletes was pretty limited. They had to be junior status. At that time, it was restricted to basically your written materials. There was very limited opportunities to bring you on campus until your senior year. And so, prior to my involvement with Michigan State, it was heavy with Northern Michigan, heavy with Michigan Tech. There were some other Division II schools, Ferris State being one that was involved. A little bit of Central, but that was just more cursory, I think, conversation at the time. And so, it was one of those things where I was also trying to navigate kind of the ice hockey aspect of going to play juniors for a year and potentially playing college hockey. So I really was really uncertain at the time, going into my senior year, what the plan was. And fortunately, I was able to, complete the senior year, get into hockey environments, was selected for the All-Star football game in that process. And that's really when the Michigan State recruiting piece came along. And so Bill Rademacher, it's a name that a lot of football people know from the UP. He was a head coach at Northern for a few years. Assistant coach under George Perlis at Michigan State. He had the UP Northern Michigan territory as his recruiting area. We started connecting the dots, and lo and behold, it worked out. Took the official visit. I think at that time it was back in February. I was actually in the second group because I was late in that process. Had a great visit, and at that time, George Perlis didn't need much more convincing, or at least they made up their mind on that visit and offered me the scholarship to attend. And so, right then and there, it was something I couldn't refuse. It was just like,
Yeah.
boom, there it is. So that changed obviously my direction with regard to my thoughts and opportunities relative to football or hockey. And so hey, I to this day I'll never regret the decision we made.
And we'll loop into hockey once we kind of dive through football. But in regards to football, so once you made your decision, you get down to campus, you start practicing. I mean, at what point did you know that you were going to be the starting punter for that first season?
Yeah, so they didn't have a punter in place. The previous punter had graduated. He was a 3-year starter. Obviously, he graduated within his senior class. And so we knew there was an opening. There was myself and another student athlete from Florida that were both coming in on scholarship. And so it was basically between he and I. And it was really about the second week of camp where, it was pretty recognizable who was going to be the person, at least from my own vantage point. I didn't have a question in my mind, but I think everybody else, where we were standing. I mean, just, everything was charted, everything is data, everything is done, daily, having a little bit more about what I want to call maybe a football mentality, a little more intestinal fortitude, a little more toughness between the ears, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty disciplined, pretty directed on getting the job. And I think that was recognized. And so, yeah, it's about the second week of camp that we figured that out.
I mean, looking at the Big Ten, right? I mean, you can take any segment of time and you're going to find phenomenal athletes. You're looking at football, you're going to find guys that made it to the Hall of Fame or ended up being big stars in the league. I mean, at the time you were in the Big Ten, Joy Galloway, Kirk Herbstreit, Mike Vrabel, Brian Greasy, John Runyon, the list goes on and on of the guys that were playing. And then on your team, you had guys like Mushin Muhammad and Derek Mason that ended up going on to have great NFL careers. So you're playing amongst some of the best athletes in the country. People have this argument all the time, the SEC or the Big Ten is better. But, regardless, you're playing against some of the best athletes and playing with some of the best athletes in the country. So, kind of looking back, being a
There you go.
starting punter, and then playing with those guys. That's got to be pretty cool, especially when you see where they ended up.
That will absolutely, and I think, when you go down there, as a freshman, I was 17 years old when I played my first game against Central, and so you don't really have that appreciation, walking into Spartan Stadium, running out on the field for that first game, and knowing and seeing the guys who are around you, who you're playing against, not only with but then against. A pretty special environment, and you learn to grow with each of those guys. When I was a freshman sophomore, we had Jimmy Miller as our quarterback. Spent several years in the league, most of his time with the Bears. We had Ty Halleck, middle linebacker. We had Rob Fredrickson, who played for the Raiders for several years. He was an All-Pro a couple of times. So again, it's just being around those guys, being that element, understanding how you need to work every day, be disciplined to the game, be disciplined to your habits, and so. And then you see how that qualifies against your opponents, and the talent and the skill that goes into the level of play that is, Big Ten or any other, uh, major Division One conference. And so, yeah, it was a great experience, obviously, and made a lot of great friends, and it's something to look back on now. 32 years ago, right? Or 22 years ago. Where am I? 32 years ago, right? 1992. I got to think about this. So we're at 10, right. So 32 years ago is a long time to walk in as a freshman. Um, and so it's one of those things where, the benefit of having that experience and having the education, having, as my wife says, when our sons, as you know them, had an opportunity to go play college athletics or team sports, you have a built-in um, friend network right there. And it's alike to perhaps a fraternity, that Greek environment where you have that commonality, you have that togetherness all built in. And so, yeah, that was a great environment to be part of, and every one of us were basically equal footing, and I can say that from my teammates' perspective all the way through that, uh, you know, the atmosphere, the environment was very supportive.
I think this is kind of I had it on the list kind of later down, but a good spot to segue. And you mentioned your sons, playing college athletics, and that's something I wanted to bring up is your family. This kind of little bit of a tangent here, but athletic family between your brothers, your dad, your sons, your nephews, whether it's playing college football or college hockey, that's pretty cool. I think when you look through a family and you see each generation, somebody's gone on to do something at high levels, all across the board.
Yeah, well, as you know, and having grown up in a sporting family, obviously with my dad, his uh, uh, his first football game as a coach at Hancock, not his first coaching gig, but at Hancock, was the day I was born. And so it's like you put that in perspective. My older cousins were part of that team. My uncle Bob, longtime coach in Hancock Bulldog athletics, very involved as a teacher, etc. And so you just in that dynamic, right? The atmosphere you grow up in. And so, again, having whether it be the immediate or extended family continue to be involved and engaged in sports, again, depending on the sport it is, it just, it's always a competitive environment. You learn a lot of life characteristics, and you learn a lot of life forming habits that are important to how you live and breathe every day. And so I think that was the biggest impact of having a competitive family, so to speak, and having the access to, as whether it be my dad as a coach, the access to the network of coaches that were out there, the people in the sporting environment that help assist you. I referenced my cousins who played for the Bulldogs. One went on to play at Northern. My older brother played at Northern, my younger brother played at Central. It's all these things that come into the conversation about maybe with Colton now, my oldest son, just as you know, Colton, he just graduated from Tech, and that Michigan Tech, Northern Michigan, what do you want to call it, camaraderie, perhaps is a better way of saying it, right? That's always enjoyable. And so yeah, just again having the family dynamic that been involved, been obviously a huge part of our life, and continues to be with my boys and my daughter. And so, Colton just finishing, Austin now at Dartmouth for his freshman year as a 21-year-old. You know how that hockey thing works. And then Kai's at Michigan Tech. So it's all the pieces that continue the process of being involved and engaged through sport.
Yeah, it's really a tremendous edge kind of talking about like you mentioned, like you've got your dad, and then you've got older brothers and younger brothers. You can all feed off of each other and use that. Obviously, brothers want to be better than their other brothers. You're competitive. You want to beat your older siblings and you want to be better than they were. But being able to come home and to lean on your parents and have them help you, it's something that not every kid has that opportunity. Some kids they go home and maybe their parents weren't athletic and their parents don't really know much about sports. So I mean it's definitely a tremendous advantage when you're growing up as a young athlete.
Well, for absolutely, without a question. Again, just having, again, I use the word access, but then just the engagement, the involvement, the dynamic that was always part of our family upbringing. You referenced the brother rivalry or the idea of wanting to be better than your older brother, which has always been the case, right? And so, a driving force again being consistent discipline, focused on outcomes is how you want to help evolve. And so, yeah, and obviously being a superintendent, formerly principal, teacher, athletic director, all of there's definitely, you know, with opportunity comes, decision making on making the best of it or the most of it. And a lot of students, a lot of kids don't have or haven't had the same access that I've had. And so, hopefully in my role now, I'm able to help support those opportunities for students that may not have it at the home.
Yeah, definitely. So now circling back to Michigan State, one of the biggest things, obviously, when you're an athlete at Michigan State is wanting to beat Michigan. It's a huge rivalry game, interstate rivalry. Obviously, everybody who knows football, basketball, any sport, it's Spartans and Wolverines, and you want to beat them, and you did. You guys beat them a couple of times. They beat you a couple of times. Do you have any real memorable moments from those matchups, those big rivalry games where the stadium is just completely packed and that atmosphere is rocking and you're playing against your biggest rival?
Yeah, a couple stick out for sure. We in my 4 year starting career, we won both games at home and lost both games at Michigan. So obviously that home field advantage was important. I guess one of the downsides or one of the downers, I should say, of a memory is playing at Michigan, and I had one of my punts return against me for a touchdown. And so that one sticks in my mind quite readily. That I can still, to this day, I can watch the whole thing in my mind in front of me just open up. And unfortunately, I wasn't going to catch a world class sprinter down the sideline, regardless of the angle I had at the time. So I'll use that as an excuse. But outside that, the two wins at home, a couple things. They had a pretty famous running back, Tyrone Wheatley, who we kept to under 34 yards for the entire game. When that game, I want to say pretty handily. The score perhaps didn't indicate it, but we stuffed them hard. That was my sophomore year, and then my senior year we had Tony Banks at the helm as our QB, and had to put together a final drive scenario to win the game. And the outcome, of course, was that we did, and it was one of those things where it was surreal. We're up, then they score late, then we have to score to win, and all that goes into it. And so just that connectedness with your teammates, the environment was it was a night game on ABC. It was a madhouse, so to speak, and so it was just a great environment to be part of. And certainly those are the things you remember. And there's not a lot of plays you remember specifically, but you remember how you win. Sometimes you remember how you feel, and those are the
Yeah.
biggest things I take away from it.
That's this huge rivalry, and it's been a little lopsided recently towards Michigan, but I think this year, State's got a solid team. and Michigan's got a different team, very run heavy team, not as much pass heavy. I think it'll bring back that real, competitive tight game. That should be exciting to watch this year.
Yeah, hope so. I think it'll be interesting to see how the quarterback for state continues to evolve as a young quarterback. He's got some great skill sets. Just watching the games here as of late, unfortunately, this past weekend here against Boston College didn't work out. But the one thing I'm noticing is that the team isn't, they're not shy about extending plays down the field, and that was always kind of one of those areas where you kind of scratch your head and with some quarterbacks that could throw the ball. Why, start spacing the defense out a little bit more, and that starts with the run game too. Though you got to be able to run a little bit to open that up. So, see how it goes. Michigan's a little bit different. Again, quarterback situation for them maybe isn't as solid as they want. But yet knowing the environment, regardless of what you do, offense or defensively, it's like the Gremlins versus the Bulldogs. You got to strap them up and be ready to play, right?
Right, yeah. It really doesn't matter who's better in those. There's teams that are winless. Speaking of Gremlins, Bulldogs, looking through that history, there's years where Houghton was winless and Hancock, was pretty solid. And you look and it was a one score game. It's always a battle when you're playing your rival. That's when you show up the most, and that translates obviously to higher levels too.
For sure.
Um, so something I didn't, I always do a little bit of research, but I didn't dig into this too much. And I was reading in 1994, you guys had to forfeit all your wins. So I guess my first question is, when did that happen? Like, were you still there when that happened, or was it something that came along later? I know sometimes years later teams will have to forfeit wins. And I guess then the second question is, why did they have to forfeit the wins?
Yeah, so that actually came later. The forfeiture of the wins after I was done. It was actually the year after I got done. Ultimately, that was also part of the reason why George Perlis was fired from coaching. It had to do with some recruiting violations and an on-campus situation with a player, and so that with monies, etc. Other, I to be honest, I can't remember the exact details, but it was relevant two things. Again, recruiting issues and then on-campus situation with a current student athlete in the program and some money transactions between, I believe, I recall this correctly, a board of trustee member and the player. So that all went down to the head coach eventually. And so again, I think that vacation happened in 96 or 97 after it all came about, because part of that process that the university went through was to, again, demonstrate that they were taking ownership. And that was part of George Pearl's firing.
Did that really bother you, or were you bothered by that, or not as much so because it happened, years later, and you knew you actually won the games that forfeited later. Did that really bother you, or?
Yeah. So again, my disclaimer here for dogs in the background, it might be not a minute or two, but when you're playing at the time, you don't, you're not aware of it, and just like you look at some of the things now that affected student athletes or programs where they've had to vacate wins or vacate Heisman trophies for that matter, when that exact activity is now occurring within the rules of the NCAA. So it's a little bit hypocritical in a way, but at the time you have to follow rules, and so. Hold on, I'm going to walk with you and quiet the dogs.
Okay.
Um, with that, just like anything, you have to abide by rules and you have to follow what's expected and what is mandated. And if you don't, then then what's going to be the outcome? Part of that is there's consequence. And at that time, the NCAA's how the framework was established with that is these were the penalties that were associated, and they had to levy the penalties.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny though what you said, like, the way things are now. It's all about money, and and giving players money. It's kind of ironic, in a way that this is where we've ended up, but I guess that's just where we are.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we got a friend here. Got one of three.
Yeah, I told you, they always end up making an appearance on the podcast eventually. Um, The last thing I wanted to bring up with football before we talk a little bit about hockey and wrap things up is you had a coaching change. And, at the time, maybe you didn't think anything of it. New guy coming in, oh, what do you do? But now looking back, at who you ended up being coached by, Nick Saban, one of the greatest college football coaches ever. And then, if you just look at football as a whole, one of the greatest coaches ever. Um, I had to be pretty cool. I mean, it was your last year, his first year. But I mean, he went on to be obviously everything he did at LSU and in the NFL and then Alabama. Great career. Obviously he's known for certain tendencies, the way he coached. So yeah, I guess just talk a little bit about being coached by Nick Saban.
Yeah, and so I gave you obviously a little bit already on what happened with George Prolis there, and so we the I'll step another one back here. So our final game of that season, my junior year, we were playing Penn State at home, and it was we were up by if I remember this correctly, I think we were up 37-10 at half, and we lost 38-37. And so that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for George, and he was fired on that Sunday right after the game. A week later, Nick Saban was hired, and he walked into our team meeting room that exactly 1 week later, and he kind of laid it out for everybody, and it was like, okay, this guy means business. And he brought in portions of his staff. One was Ken Manny, and I'll never forget this. Ken Manny was our strength and conditioning coach at the time. He came from Toledo. Nick was at Toledo for a little bit. Knew Ken, brought him over. Ken just retired a couple years ago from state, so longtime fixture at Michigan State. Just an incredible man, but just so intense. The two of them were identical on us with intensity. And the one thing that sticks in my mind is, he was, and I've told everybody this, he was actually very, very good to us as a senior class. He met with every one of us individually. We all met together as a group in his leadership group, and we did that weekly. And so he was very caring about his players, but he held you to a standard that was different. And so that standard was ultimately, you do your job, you're accountable to your role, you do the best you can. If you make mistakes, he'll help correct it. But if it's one of those things where somebody else can step in and do a better job, he wasn't shy about that. He would put somebody else in that position, or he would, coach you up to make you better and to just make you more disciplined in your role and be more accountable. And he still preaches that same message you hear from when he's in Alabama the last several years. Same message in 1995. It didn't change, and that was from his coaching lineage, right? His network. He was a GA for Michigan State under Jordan, so there was that connection. Then he went to Toledo. Then he went to the pros. He worked with Bill Belichick with the Browns. And so again, you look at that lineage, that tree, so to speak, and then what he's developed from that. Again, it's kind of remarkable to hear him in 2022 saying the same exact things he told us in 1995, right?
Yeah. Hey, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Like just if it works for him, and obviously clearly it did everywhere he went. The guy had success and he made a lasting impact. So keep preaching it that way. Yeah, he's definitely just a monumental figure when you look at athletics as a whole. It's weird looking at a world of college football without him in it. I mean, he's on College Game Day as an analyst, and that's weird. I mean, you're used to seeing Nick Saban in Alabama, not Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. It's got a different sound to it, and it's a little bit unusual after so many years of him being around the sport.
Right. No, I mean, it is a little bit. I don't want to use a commenter, but watching him on game day, and then he's taken that. Obviously, you said an analyst approach, but he still has those same eyes. When he looks at McCarthy over next to him on his right, is like you can. I know what he's thinking almost, what he wants to say, but he bites his tongue a little bit. And so yeah, it's fun to watch. It's been having that connection to him as a senior student athlete at State and watching his career unfold. And again, I got the dogs in the background. His career unfold, and obviously how the impact he's made on college football, the impact he's made on student athletes in college football, and the thing about him was that he was a very, very difficult coach. Again, not for student athletes, but he was difficult on programs. He demanded, I don't want to say perfection, but he demanded accountability in everything you did, 24/7, and that wore on a lot of people. And so, I'm sure with his success in his career as he's gotten older, maybe that there wasn't as much pressure around his program, especially when you get a place like Alabama and you have all the resources in the world to be able to operate and be successful. But nonetheless, again, like you said right before, if something isn't broken, you don't fix it, and the pathway of success is what and he definitely had his pathway.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure we could talk more and more about football, but we'll move on to hockey here just for a little bit before we wrap up the episode. You had mentioned early on when you were recruiting that you had wanted to pursue hockey too, and you had the ability to do both at Michigan State, which is a little bit unusual. There's a lot of dual sport athletes, but I feel like it's often football, baseball, football, track paired up. Not a ton of football, hockey. So interesting, a little bit of overlap there in the seasons and everything. So yeah, I guess I don't know where you want to kind of start with that, but like, how did that, I guess, come about? Like, when you initially recruited, did you think that was an opportunity, or did that all come later?
So, well, it actually came later, but initially there were some conversations. I know with the hockey program and the football program, they had asked the question when I went there as a freshman. The thing about George Perlis was he didn't let any of his student athletes be a dual sport athlete. So, oftentimes we talked about earlier about the kind of athletes we had in the football program. Many of those guys were exceptional multi-sport athletes, whether it be basketball players or in particular baseball players. George wouldn't let anybody do it. And so when my freshman, sophomore years, I was actually playing, not that football knew this, but I was playing on a men's league team with one of the assistant coaches from hockey who was actually the primary recruiter for the program. I knew him and he knew me. And so we just, had that opportunity to play once a week together, kind of my escape away, type of thing away from the season. And so what happened was obviously my junior year at the end of season with George being fired and Nick came on. They had an injury to their defensive ranks. One of their players blew a knee. And even though they had seven healthy D, they couldn't really maybe risk the idea of losing another one. And so right when Nick came on, Coach Mason asked him if it'd be okay if I came down and started playing with the team for the remainder of that season. So that again, we were done at Thanksgiving, so I had basically all December to go through the rest of the season. And the funny part of that is that I referenced before when Nick came on that week after we started dry land right away. And so it was about 4 days in the dry land. We're in our indoor facility doing sprints and workouts and things like that. And Coach Saban comes walking up to me, and I don't know what to think, right? And he just kind of looks at me, goes with this look in his eye that he has. He goes, "Salani, do you play hockey?" And I looked at him, and I didn't know how to answer. And I said, "Yeah, I do actually." He goes, "Okay, well, Coach Mason would like you to go down there right now and go talk to him." And so that was kind of the start of that, obviously with that overlap. But you know, um, Coach Mason brought me right into the fold, got me going within the next week. I affectionately say again, like old timers, hockey got me away from the tougher parts of football with your off season conditioning and the grind that goes with that, and not being able to play in games, things like so. So that aspect turned very quickly. So I practiced basically for 2 weeks before the holiday break. Went back and with the team for the remainder of that second semester, going through the season. And then senior year, same kind of thing. We did play in a bowl game my senior year, so it wasn't until after that January bowl game that I got to get back on the ice with the team. And so it was one of those things where, again, just the ability to have that connection with teammates, with a program, with the people around it, the people like Coach Mason, invaluable. Just learning from them, understanding how to be a better person, how to be a better student athlete, how to be a better man. All that goes into it. It was certainly just a wonderful, again, experience that I wasn't looking for originally because I kind of knew. But then again, hey, if it falls in your lap, you try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely really cool, unique experience. And then you ended up doing a little coaching at Massachusetts. So you ended up continuing in hockey a little bit after your football career was done. So how did you get into that little bit of coaching there?
Yeah, so I was going to grad school, and there were only two grad schools I was planning on going to, and UMass Amherst, which is their flagship campus in Amherst, Massachusetts, Division One program there. Great facilities, infrastructure. The head coach of the program there knew the coaching staff, obviously at Michigan State, and they knew I was going. I went through the process to be vetted into the sports management program, graduate work there, and kind of set up. They were willing to give me a GA spot to start, and so started at graduate level that first year, and then worked into that third, what they call a third position, in college at the time. And so a great experience, getting the masters out there and staying involved with the sport, making the network, et cetera, and just having a lot of fun with it. And being able to utilize that when I come back to the state of Michigan. My wife finished her work down at Central for her PA, and then obviously getting the job up at Finlandia for the AD role there.
Yeah, no, that's kind of cool that your main focus was football when you're at state, but then you ended up coaching hockey afterwards. Kind of neat. So, kind of end the episode here. You mentioned watching state football, but I mean, are you connected with the programs, football or hockey? I mean, you get down there for games, very often, or kind of since your time there?
Yeah, it's been infrequent for sure. We would love to get down there more often than we could, obviously, with the family dynamics of fall and winter sports and time and career, all that goes into it. The last time actually we were down at a game, I think it was the fall of 2019, I believe it was, when State was playing Ohio State at home. We got down for a game. And so we got to watch that, and that was the last football game. We got to see, obviously, things have kind of since then, as the world goes around, have changed a little bit and opportunities. Hockey, I have not been down to a hockey game in several years, probably since 2016. And so, I do still have connections down there, still have a lot of friends that work within the environment. So we stay in touch occasionally. And again, if there's a need to get down or an opportunity to get down there and try to get into a game, I know who I can call to get those tickets, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, like you said, it's hard. Once you start your life is busy. And especially at a far drive like that. I mean, I'm sure it'd be different if you lived downstate, and it was just a 3 hour pop over or something. But living way up here, it's definitely not easy, especially with hockey. You hit winter and it's not easy travel.
For sure.
Um, so I end every episode on music. I'm a big music guy. I like hearing about what other people like for music. What kind of music do you like if you're gonna listen to music? Like, what's your favorite bands?
Hmm. So, I don't want to say I'm eclectic, but I like a lot of different genres. And I think the biggest thing growing up, and your dad and mom would appreciate this for sure. We had the big hair 80s band stuff that we grew up on, right? So we were always partial to a lot of the music we hear back from the 80s. But then, since college, I think country genre is probably my favorite, but that's not to say I won't step out the proverbial box and listen to a lot of different things from uh, of all things classical all the way to jazz. Would love to go to a bar and sit down and listen to some great jazz music and just have fun with it. And so, I mean, it's one of those things where, like you, I just enjoy music at large. But when we come to country, you have your traditional artists and your more I guess new vogue or in vogue country stars now, and you learn to grow with the music as it's shaped out since the 80s and 90s, to the Y2Kers now to where we're at today. And so, you know, um, I couldn't really pick one for you or two, but just to know that, I do enjoy a lot of it. And it's fun to be, we have our YouTube channel here. When we pop it on, we listen nightly. We'll throw on the music search button or just let it roll on the playlist and then just enjoy it. So, yeah, I don't want to disappoint you without that one, but it's
Here,
someone.
maybe this will be now. A lot of people they can kind of pull this right out and they know exactly what it was. But like, do you remember what one of your first cassettes was that you bought as a kid? Like, what band you bought? I don't know. Some people can pull it out.
Yeah, I don't. So I'm going to go back to vinyl, actually. So we're talking early '80s, and I think it was the Boss Springsteen. It was a double album that he came out with. So that was the first one that I bought that I remember buying that. So
Yeah,
you save up your gas your lawn mowing money for a couple weeks, and you go buy the vinyl or the cassettes. But yeah, that's what I think might have been the first one I said. Oh, I got to buy that.
yeah.
It's on the radar.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a different world with music now. No vinyl. Well, I mean, vinyl's making a comeback, but it's not the same.
Right, for sure. Yeah, the
All
old
right.
Walkman is still in hand, right?
Yeah, well, hey, it's a different kind of sound, and it's nice to go back to the classics once in a while.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we could talk for hours more about everything you've been through, and athletic director and everything else. But I really appreciate you taking some time out of your night and going over your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Alex, love to do it again. Can have further conversations about being a player. That's like you said, there's lots of stories that we could dig deep with.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes soon.